So today we are talking about soy and the block on the bottom here of the sheet where it says cut out soy and what exactly is meant by that and why am I doing it. So first of all, let's talk just for a second about the 80-20 rule, which we're going to talk a lot about with every block on here because, you know, we do what we can basically in the 80-20 rule. And I'm actually, I subscribe more to like the 90-10, and so it just depends on what's possible for you. But in regards to 80-20, you want to control 80% of what goes into your body: food, alcohol, chemicals, lotions, absorbing, all these things, deodorants, that kind of stuff. So 80% you want to try to make sure is clean, quality, not disruptive, not considered risky or unsafe or unresearched. So 80% is a good number to start with. So in the spirit of that 80%, soy in particular is one that's controversial, and it just really is in that category of, if we don't know for sure, why are we consuming it? So let's talk a little bit about why I avoid soy in my daily life, and hopefully I can convince you to avoid it too. So I have four main reasons why I don't eat soy. Number one is they contain something called phytates, and a lot of stuff contains this chemical because it's a seed. And so anytime you eat a bean or a legume of any kind, anytime you eat a lentil, a grain, anything like that, it's going to have a phytate. So what that is it's a protective covering that basically ensures the seed is going to make it until the next growing season. So think about a plant when it's killed or when it's naturally time to die. What does it do? It releases its seeds to the ground and hopes that they will regrow next year as a new plant. So when the seed is dropped, it is covered in a shell coating that's chemical, basically, but it can also be hard. Like, think about an almond. Its shell is not chemical, it's hard, you know, like you have to crack it open. But a lot of seeds have a chemical coating, so it's called phytate. Anyway, that chemical, I want to call it an enzyme. I don't know what you would call it. Anyway, humans have a hard time digesting the chemical. So when it enters the system, it can cause gastric distress, which is uncomfortable for a lot of people, which is why a lot of people say, I don't eat beans because my stomach gets upset. But more importantly, besides the gastric feeling of distress, it can actually act as a nutrient inhibitor. So it gets into your stomach lining, and then you're not able to absorb the nutrients that goes along with that food. So if you're eating beans for protein and you don't soak them overnight to get rid of the phytate, you are not going to absorb the protein. So that's just something to know about seeds in general. But soybeans in particular, because they take the soybean straight from the field and they use it, they grind it up, or, you know, whatever process they want to put it through, they are not getting rid of the phytate coating first. So it enters the food supply with that on it, which means it's a nutrient block in the intestine. And the problem I also have with that is that, like, I don't know, some crazy amount, like 90% of our salad dressings in America are made with soybean oil. So think about the fact that it may be actually inhibiting you from getting the nutrients out of the salad. It's crazy to think about, but it's true. Phytates, they've proven, do not allow you to absorb as many nutrients. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is because it contributes to our overabundance of omega-6 in the diet without the health benefits of, like, say, avocado oil, which is also an omega-6. But the avocado oil or olive oils, those give us more vitamins and nutrients. So What it is you have omega-3 and omega-6. Our American diet is super high in these omega-6s, but what happens when you're not eating a counteractive omega-3 to make it even is we have inflammation. So every single time you're consuming high amounts of omega-6 and not omega-3, which think walnuts, fish oil, any kind of fish really, salmon, those kinds of things that can give you the omega-3, then you've got an imbalance which causes a problem. So that's why we take a fish oil supplement to kind of counteract that balance, make us more even in the ratios, because people who thrive have a ratio of omega-6 and omega-3 that are even. Okay, reason number 3, the biggest reason, is they are considered what's called an isoflavone. So what happens is the body, basically it's a phytoestrogen. So it goes into the body. It's a chemical. It interferes with the hormones in the body. Well, it can do 2 things. It can either block them, or it can... My computer just went to sleep. Hopefully that didn't just black out. It can either block them from being... Okay, let me back up just a little bit. So what happens when you disrupt the endocrine process? You eat a soybean, which is a phytoestrogen. It can turn on the estrogen receptors within the cells. It can, basically, it makes cells come alive. So think about breast tissue, for instance. There are epithelial cells in the breast, and when we eat soybeans, it can, with some people, not everyone, but with some people, it can activate the tissue. It can bring those epithelial cells more active, more abundant, and all of those cells that become breast tissue are actually the same type of cells who are the most receptive to cancer, to turning to cancer. And so there has been a correlation, a large-scale study correlation between high levels of estrogen in the diet and by means of soybeans. So high estrogen in the diet by soybean consumption, and increased risk of breast cancer and increased tumor growth. So that is the biggest reason why I avoid soy in particular, especially if you are a canary, because I mean they've done large scale studies on it, and there's actually 2 different studies that I've read recently, and they actually proved opposites of each other, that soy is an endocrine disruptor, and depending on your human biology, what it does. So it can either turn the receptors on, or it can turn the receptors off. And it's basically what happens when they turn it off is it blocks the actual more potent estrogen within the body from binding to the cell. So you end up with a low estrogen level, which is not dangerous, but it can jack with you, especially as a male as a female. So you don't really want low estrogen levels. Those are the women who are in there getting, hormones chemically. You don't want to do that if possible. I mean, why would we eat something that could influence the binding of estrogen? That's crazy to me. Why we eat these abundant amounts of soy in the form of tofu, soybean oil, edamame, like all these things, and it causes all this havoc within the body of a lot of women, not a small percentage, by the way. So anyway, studies have shown that it can increase your risk of breast cancer. Obviously, you have to have the genetic component, because what happens is if you're genetically predisposed in any way, shape, or form to have that kind of cancer, then you have an external trigger. So soy can be a trigger. We just kind of want to avoid that. So let's see, make sure I said everything about that. I think I did. Okay, now the reason number 4, I'm not going to get into a whole lot, because this is something that you would know was wrong with you by now. It can also be a trigger for Hashimoto's disease. So if you have diagnosed low thyroid disease, there are studies out there that have also correlated increased soy in the diet with Hashimoto's, and also wheat. So the 2 go together on the Hashimoto's. Anyway, so the last reason, which is another of the big reasons, is that it is GMO. So we're going to talk a lot about GMOs and the reason why this is catastrophic. So think about soybeans in the USA. You've got 100% of soybeans, okay? 61, no, I'm sorry, 90% of those soybeans are GMO produced. They are a Monsanto Roundup Ready variety seed. And I'm going to talk about what that means in a second. But then you've got 9% of the soybeans grown in the USA, which are conventional grown, meaning just regular traditional farmed, but they are not using Roundup Ready seed. They're using what is going to be soon called an heirloom seed because it's the old seeds that we've had since the beginning of time. Now, the remaining 1% of soybeans grown in the USA are organic. So we're talking a very small sharehold of the crop grown is organic. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why we don't want to eat the Roundup Ready soybean. So there is a chemical compound called glyphosate, and this is something you're going to hear a lot about in the videos. It's something that I credit, gosh, it just happened again. I need to remember to move my mouse. Okay, so it's something that I credit as being why all these diseases are on a spike upward in the country, including ADD, autism in children. It's a very long, complicated explanation, so I'm not trying to simplify it and say it's all just glyphosate, but that is the starting point to all kinds of havoc that's happening. It's people look at all these statistical graphs and they see obesity in the United States going like this, and then they compare it to certain variables. But when you put all the variables on the graph, then you can see, okay, where is it correlating with this up spike? There's lots of factors going on. Any one of them could be at fault, but we are talking about a chemical that we are ingesting every single time we consume food in this country. So it has to play a role in the obesity, metabolic syndrome, all sorts of stuff, stomach cancer, celiac disease. I could go on and on and on. I'm trying to make this brief. So let's just know that glyphosate is a really bad chemical. I don't know if you were old enough to remember DDT. They used to spray it in the neighborhoods. They'd have a big truck that would come through. I don't think you are old enough because I was just a baby when it stopped, and I think I'm a little older than you. But anyway, the trucks would come through the neighborhood, and it would plume these big smokes of DDT out into the neighborhood to repel mosquitoes. This is the chemical that they banned, once they figured out the problems that it was causing us. So this was a time period before Congress basically became polluted with big money, which is Monsanto has paid billions of dollars to keep their products on the market, which is why they're still here, and it didn't get banned like DDT, and it should have been banned already. So, but there are lots of campaigns out there working on getting it banned. I am totally signed up for them. If you're interested in doing that, let me know. I can show you how to get plugged into that. Okay, so 90% of GMO of soybeans are GMO, which means they're Roundup Ready, which means that the crop can be grown in a field. It can be sprayed excessively with glyphosate, which is Roundup. That when I say glyphosate, I mean Roundup. So it's the same crap that's in your garage probably that you've used on your sidewalk cracks. So they spray the field, like just any amount of glyphosate they want to spray on that field, this plant can withstand it, because what Monsanto has done is taken the DNA of the soybean plant and injected it with Roundup, which then, that's how you can affect evolution, basically. So they have made the soybean plant think of Roundup as an okay substance. It is no longer an enemy. So the soybean plant does not fight the Roundup, which means they can spray the weeds, they can control these killer weeds that are happening because we have glyphosate in the soil, that we are now spawning weeds we can't even kill. But that's a whole nother story. Anyway, so think about this, what I'm saying. We are eating a food that can be sprayed a chemical that's terrible as many times as a farmer sees fit or it needs to do so, and then we're eating it. And it can be as little as moments before harvest, because a lot of times they'll up the spray right before harvest because they want to kind of weaken the plant so that it's easier to pull the seeds off. You know, you think about the wheat plant, when it's being chopped down, they have to like hack it down because the stalk is so big. Especially in America, we've grown like this super big, you know, wheat plant now. And so what they do is they actually, wheat is not GMO, by the way. So they're spraying wheat with glyphosate to kill it. And then what happens right before they kill it is the seed pot, obviously, like what I was talking about earlier, the seed is released. And so then they don't have to hack away the plant. They can just pick up the seeds. So it makes harvest, you know, much easier, much more cost effective. They have less labor they have to pay. All of these things are happening. So anyway, that is why I particularly avoid soy in my diet. There's lots of steps I take to avoid it. You cannot avoid it altogether. I'm here to tell you. It is impossible because we use soy in so many ways. It's not even funny. Okay, so bottom line about soy. Those reasons are the top ones. There are more reasons to avoid it. Let's talk a little bit about what most people say, which is, well, what about Eastern countries who have been consuming soy since the beginning of time? So the soy that those countries have been consuming since the beginning of time is very different. Number one, it's most of the time fermented. So think about miso, natto. They are not eating the soy. They have figured out that a lot of the problem with the soy is in eating it the way it is, you know, the phytates that I was talking about earlier. Any kind of fermentation gets rid of all that. If all you have to do is soak a soybean for like 8 hours, or even just soak and rinse, soak and rinse, soak and rinse, and let it sprout. As soon as that sprout pops out of the soybean, the phytate is gone. It's gone. It's ready for a growing season. It doesn't need that chemical compound anymore, so it gets rid of it. So anyway, these are all the steps that the Eastern countries have figured out and have allowed them to keep soy in their diet, and it's not as harmful to them. They are, however, proving to have the estrogen effect with countries who are eating it in high volume. So the fermented, it seems to get rid of all of the estrogen components. You can consume fermented soy. So don't think I'm talking about don't eat miso or anything fermented. What I'm talking about is the way that we use soy in America in salad dressings, soybean oil, tofu, things like that. Okay, so bottom line is it's not really worth the risk to consume it, and think about the implication of the soy on a canary, like what we were talking about. Organic. If you choose organic soy, you are ensuring it is not GMO. So you are getting rid of one of the bad guys there. It is still an estrogen, you know, risk, but it's absolutely not GMO, and so it's a more, you're not going to have the havoc of the glyphosate in the diet at that point. So how do I avoid soy in my daily diet? Number one, I don't eat it. Like, I used to eat it at Japanese restaurants, edamame. I used to love it, actually. I even started eating it at home for a little while before I found out all this stuff. I used to have a face lotion that was made by soy. You know, I'm trying to be natural, and I choose a face lotion. And what I have read since is that when you put soy lotion on your face, you know, it gets right in here, and so this is, when it's absorbed in places along the neck right here, that is where it can be most destructive to the thyroid. So just know all these little things that, you know, remember 80-20? We're not trying to be crazy here and say I'm never going to consume soy, because then I would never eat in a restaurant again, because they all use soy in the dressings and whatnot. So this is what I do. I make my dressings homemade with olive oil at home for 80% of the time. I also do not eat and consume soy products like that are cooked in soybean oil, that are made from soy. You know, there's soy crackers out there. There's all kinds of stuff you can buy that's just made with soy. So all these things, if you avoid it, you're minimizing the problem. And so as much as you can minimize the problem, you know, some people say, I am just not willing to make my salad dressings at home. That's just a deal breaker for me. That's fine. Minimize it in the other ways. Just minimize it as much as you can do in your life that fits your needs, and then you're going to be better off for it. But I do encourage you, if you're going to buy salad dressings with the soy in it, please try to buy an organic salad dressing so that you are avoiding the GMO component, because that is, I feel personally, the bigger problem than the endocrine disruptor, because you do kind of have to eat a little bit more soy than, you'd have to consume tofu and stuff to kind of get the estrogenic issues going. So anyway, let me know if you have any questions at all. Soy, as a general rule, is not a health food. I wish people would stop putting it out there in the market as a health food. It's not. It's not even close to a health food. It's like a bean with problems. So why are we eating that particular bean when there are other beans that we could be eating that give us just as much nutrition? So anyway, think about that. Food for thought. Let me know if you have any questions whatsoever, but it is a stepping stone. Any of these individual blocks, they don't really mean a whole lot by themselves, but when you string them together, just like this list does, or like any list does, when you string the things together, it's a big impact, especially if you're taking care of it in your daily life at home, not cooking with soy at home, not choosing soy products. All of these things can contribute to your well-being. So one more thing I did forget, soy lecithin especially is in everything. You absolutely cannot avoid it entirely. So when you see soy lecithin, if there is another choice, on the shelf, pick the other one, just as a note, because soy lecithin is used as an emulsifier. What it does is it binds water to oil. So, they need it, especially, it's one of the less harmful emulsifiers out there. So you cannot avoid it altogether. Just be mindful of it and try to avoid it in your daily life, and you'll be much better off. So that's it. Bye.